Narrator calm but eerie. Forests are supposed to guide us. They give us trails, worn paths made by footsteps before ours, meant to keep us from getting lost. But sometimes, you'll see a trail that doesn't belong. A path that seems new, fresh, almost calling to you. And once you step onto it, you may never come back the same. Pause, faint crunch of leaves. Tonight, I want to share with you 3 terrifying true-style stories. Stories of people just like you and me who stumbled across a path that wasn't supposed to be there. And what they found waiting at the end will make you think twice before ever wandering off the trail. Slightly lowered tone, teasing curiosity. Would you follow it? Or would you turn back? Stick with me until the end. And if you love creepy tales told late at night, don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Beat, transition sound effect like a branch snapping. Narrator. Let's begin with story 1. The trail behind the campsite. Narrator calm, inviting but eerie. Have you ever gone camping deep in the woods? Away from the city, away from people. Just you, your friends, and miles of forest in every direction? Most of us think of it as peaceful, a way to escape. But what if, out there in the dark, the forest wasn't empty? What if it showed you something that wasn't supposed to exist? That's what happened to Daniel. And after that trip, he never set foot in the woods again. Stick with me, because this story will make you think twice before wandering too far from your campfire. And if you enjoy creepy true-style stories like this, make sure you subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Opening scene. Narrator. Daniel was 23 years old, a college student who had grown up hiking and camping with his family. He loved the outdoors. So when his 3 friends, Chris, Jenna, and Tyler, suggested a weekend camping trip in Oregon, Daniel was the first to say yes. They packed up, drove out past the small towns, and found a remote spot in the thick forest. Towering pines surrounded them. The air smelled like fresh moss, and a small clearing made the perfect site for their tents. It was late afternoon by the time they set up camp, and everything felt perfect. They lit a fire, unpacked their cooler, and settled in. That's when Daniel noticed it. Behind their tents, just barely visible in the fading light, was a narrow dirt path. It cut straight into the trees, thin, sharp, almost too neat to be natural. "Hey," Daniel asked, pointing. "Was that there when we got here?" His friends looked, then shrugged. "Probably just a deer trail," Chris said, brushing it off. They all went back to roasting marshmallows, laughing and talking. But Daniel couldn't stop looking at it. The way the trees leaned inward, how the shadows seemed darker there. It bothered him. It didn't feel like an animal trail. It felt deliberate. Rising tension. Narrator. Later, when the fire burned low and they all crawled into their tents, Daniel tried to sleep. But the forest had changed. The buzzing of insects, the occasional call of an owl gone. The woods were silent. Then he heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. Slow, steady, circling their campsite. Daniel froze. His heart pounded. He held his breath, waiting. The footsteps stopped. He dared to unzip his tent just a little, peeking out. No one was there. The campfire had burned down to glowing embers. Shadows stretched long across the clearing, and that strange path behind their tents seemed brighter under the moonlight. The dirt glowed pale, almost silvery, as if the moon itself was pointing at it. Daniel quickly zipped his tent shut. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and even though he didn't say a word about it the next morning, he couldn't stop thinking about that trail. Where did it go? And why did it feel like it was waiting for him? Climax. Narrator. By dawn, curiosity got the better of him. While his friends were still half asleep, Daniel grabbed a flashlight and said he was going to collect firewood. He walked to the start of the path and stepped onto it. Immediately, the air felt colder. The forest here looked different. Darker, older, the trees twisted into strange shapes. The path wound deeper and deeper, pulling him in. Then he found something. An old campsite. A rusted lantern lay in the dirt. A cooler, broken open and empty. Sleeping bags shredded, their fabric rotting and torn. And carved into the trees around the clearing were names. Dozens of them. Some weathered, some fresh. Daniel stepped closer, his stomach sinking. One of the names carved into the bark was his own. Daniel. The letters were sharp, jagged, freshly scratched. He staggered back, fear pounding in his chest. That's when the forest went completely still. No sound, no wind, and then a whisper. Right behind him. Daniel! He spun around, nothing. Panic surged through him. He turned and ran, sprinting back toward camp. But the trail twisted in ways it hadn't before. The trees seemed to close in, the dirt path looping endlessly. His lungs burned, branches whipped across his arms, and he swore he heard footsteps chasing him. Until finally, he burst through the clearing of their campsite, collapsing near the tents, pale and gasping for air. His friends jumped up. Dude, what the hell happened? Daniel looked back. The path was gone, completely gone, as if it had never existed. Ending and reflection. Narrator. That was the last time Daniel ever went camping. He never told his friends the truth. Not about the old campsite, not about his name carved into the trees, not about the whisper. But even now, years later, he still dreams about it. Always the same dream. A narrow dirt trail leading into the woods. His name carved deep into bark. And a voice calling him to follow. And maybe the scariest part isn't that the path vanished. It's the thought that one night, somewhere out there in the forest, it might appear again. Because sometimes, the woods don't just hold trails made by man or animal. Sometimes the forest makes its own. And those paths aren't meant for you. Wind gust sound, fade to silence. Narrator teasing curiosity. Would you have followed that trail? Or stayed by the fire? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear what you would have done. And if you're still with me, don't forget to subscribe because the next story, well, the next one takes a shortcut that should never have existed. Narrator calm, reflective. Hiking is supposed to be simple. You follow the trail, enjoy the scenery, and if you're careful, you always end up back where you started. But sometimes, the forest offers you another choice. A path you weren't meant to see. And once you take it, you may never find your way back. This is the story of Maya. She was 31 years old, a dedicated hiker who knew the local trails better than most people know their own neighborhoods. But one evening, while racing the sunset, she stumbled across something she never should have followed. Stick with me because this one is unsettling. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss the next story. Opening scene. Narrator. Maya had been hiking the same Oregon trail system for years. It was her routine. Every few evenings after work, she'd lace up her boots, throw on a backpack, and head into the woods. She loved the sound of the wind in the pines, the way sunlight dripped gold through the branches. One evening, though, she cut it close. The sun was already dipping low, the air cooling fast. She picked up her pace, determined to reach the halfway point before turning back. That's when she noticed it. Path she didn't recognize. It branched off from the main trail, just ahead of her boots. Narrow, freshly carved. The dirt sharp and clean as though it had been cut into the earth that very morning. But what made her stop wasn't just how new it looked. It was the trees. Each trunk lining the trail had a strange symbol painted onto it. Circles, crosses, spirals. Like crude markings scrawled in dark paint. Maya frowned. She'd hiked this area hundreds of times. This path had never existed before. And yet, she felt a pull. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the adrenaline of racing the fading daylight. But against her better judgment, Maya decided to take the shortcut. Rising tension. Narrator. At first, it felt exciting, like she was exploring something hidden. The trail dipped deeper into the forest, shadows stretching long across the dirt. But as minutes passed, Maya realized something was off. The shortcut didn't reconnect to the main trail. Instead, it twisted endlessly, looping in directions that didn't make sense. She stopped, turned, and looked back. The path behind her stretched on like a straight tunnel, darker than it should have been. Weird, she muttered, pulling chalk from her pack. She sometimes used it to mark routes during longer hikes. Carefully, she drew a big X across the trunk of a tree. Then she continued forward. Minutes later, the forest grew strange. The branches leaned too close, the leaves whispering though no wind blew. She kept glancing behind her, swearing she saw shadows dart between the trees. Her skin prickled. She turned around to check her chalk marks, but they were gone. In their place were claw marks, long, deep scratches gouged into the bark, fresh enough that tiny splinters still clung to the tree. Maya's throat went dry. The forest was rearranging itself. Climax. Narrator. She picked up her pace, panic creeping into her chest. Every turn looked the same. Every tree seemed to watch her. Then she heard it. A sound that froze her blood. The faint, muffled crying of a child. It came from deeper ahead, soft and pitiful, like someone lost. Maya's heart twisted. Her instincts screamed, "Don't go." But her humanity pushed her forward. What if some kid had actually wandered off the trail? What if they were in danger? She followed the sound, her boots crunching faster over the dirt. The crying grew louder, pulling her until the path opened into a clearing. And then, it stopped. Maya stood in the center of a circle of trees. No exit, no trail leading forward, no trail behind. Just walls of forest pressing in. And in the middle of that silence, she saw it. A figure. It stood at the far end of the clearing, half hidden in shadow. First, it looked human. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized it wasn't right. Too tall. Its limbs stretched just a little too long. The head tilted unnaturally. Its face was pale, smooth, and blank, like skin stretched over where eyes and a mouth should be. The figure lifted its hands slowly, reaching toward her. Maya's breath caught, and just like that, the child's crying started again. But this time it wasn't distant. It came from the figure, from its empty face. Maya stumbled back, every nerve in her body screaming to run. But there was no path out, no way back. Just that thing, standing still, reaching for her. Ending. Narrator. She didn't think. She just ran. Maya threw herself at the trees, crashing through branches, pushing past brambles that tore her arms and legs. She didn't care where she was going. She just knew she had to escape. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred with tears. The crying followed her, louder and louder, until it suddenly cut off. And just like that, she stumbled out, onto the real trail. The familiar dirt path lay under her boots, the golden glow of sunset bleeding between the trees. Behind her, the shortcut was gone. Nothing but forest. No fresh dirt. No marked trees. Just silence. Maya collapsed to her knees, shaking, sobbing with relief. She stayed there for nearly an hour before finally forcing herself back down the trail. And from that day on, she never hiked alone again. Not because she feared wild animals. Not because of strangers. But because she knew, deep down, that one day, the forest might offer her another path. And this time, she might not come back. Pause. Wind fades. Eerie echoing cry in the distance. Narrator low curious. If you had been in Maya's shoes, would you have followed the sound of that child crying? Or turned back the moment the symbols appeared? Let me know in the comments. I read them all. And if you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because the final story tonight is about a forest ranger who found a path no one should ever see. The forest at night has a way of swallowing sound. Every rustle, every distant hoot, every crunch beneath your boots feels amplified, sharper, almost like the woods themselves are listening back. That's what Ethan always told new rangers during training. And for 20 years, he'd patrolled Oregon's sprawling forestland, confident, steady, and unshaken by the stories locals whispered about missing hikers. But one night, he found a path that should never have existed. Opening scene, calm unease. It was late, The kind of late where the moon hangs just above the treetops and the air feels like it's holding its breath. Ethan, 45, was out on a patrol after receiving a troubling report. 3 hikers had gone missing over the past 2 weeks, all in the same sector of the forest. Their belongings were discovered scattered near trails, but the hikers themselves? Nowhere. Ethan had been over this ground 100 times before. He knew every bend, every landmark, every official trail carved into the park system. But as he rounded a familiar bend that night, something caught his eye. Path. Narrow, faint, glowing softly in the moonlight, like it had been carved freshly into the soil. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks. He'd walked this route countless times. There had never been a trail here. And yet, there it was. He radioed in, "Control. This is Ranger Ethan. I'm at marker 7. Found something unusual, going to check it out." But static hissed back at him. No confirmation. No reply. Rising tension. The path seemed to pull him forward. Each step he took crunched lightly, but the air grew heavier. The deeper he went, the stranger the forest became. Trees that should have been young and green were suddenly ancient. Gnarled trunks twisting skyward, bark blackened and slick with moss. The air smelled of damp earth, like the ground itself had been rotting. Halfway down, Ethan froze. A backpack lay discarded in the middle of the trail. A phone beside it, its screen shattered. One shoe, its laces frayed and dirty. He bent down, inspecting them carefully. These weren't abandoned years ago, they were fresh. Too fresh. And then he heard it. Ethan. His name. Carried on the wind. Faint but unmistakable. He jerked upright, shining his flashlight around. Nothing. Only shadows shifting between the trees. Another whisper. "Help us, Ethan." But this time he recognized the voices. They were the voices of the missing hikers. Climax, the meadow of no time. The trail eventually opened into a clearing. A meadow Ethan had never seen marked on any map. The air was wrong here. The moon hung directly overhead, frozen in place, casting a cold silver glow that didn't flicker or move. Not even the grass stirred. It was as though time itself had stopped. And then he saw them. The missing hikers. 3 of them standing side by side at the far end of the clearing. Their clothes matched the descriptions from the reports. Their skin was pale, almost translucent. Their eyes hollow. They didn't move, didn't speak, until they raised their arms and beckoned him forward. Ethan's heart pounded. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, but his legs felt heavy, as if something unseen had hooked into his muscles, pulling him forward. He was 10 feet from them when a new sound cut through the silence. His own voice, "Ethan, don't go," came from behind him, clear, urgent, terrified. He whipped around, flashlight trembling, and saw nothing, just the trail he had entered from. When he looked back at the hikers, they were smiling now. Wide, unnatural grins spreading across pale faces. Their eyes glowed faintly, like lanterns burning from within. Ethan stumbled backward, adrenaline finally breaking the spell. Ending, escape. He turned and ran. Branches tore at his arms as he sprinted down the path, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out everything else. The voices followed him, sometimes behind, sometimes ahead, sometimes inside his own skull. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the path crumbled away beneath his feet. 1 second he was on solid dirt, the next he was crashing through thick underbrush, tumbling hard onto the real trail he knew. He scrambled to his feet, gasping for breath. Behind him, nothing. No clearing, no strange meadow, no glowing trail. Only the forest he'd always known. The radio crackled to life in his pocket. "Ranger Ethan, do you copy? We lost your signal for a while." His hands shook too badly to press the button. He just stared into the dark, listening to the forest return to its normal sounds. Crickets, distant owls, the sigh of wind through the branches. It was over. At least that's what he told himself. Reflection. Ethan never reported what he saw in full detail. In his official write-up, he listed the hikers as still missing. But off the record, he told one colleague the truth, that some trails don't lead deeper into the forest. They lead somewhere else entirely. A year later, Ethan resigned from his post as a ranger. To this day, he refuses to step into the woods after dark. Because sometimes the forest makes paths appear that were never meant for human feet. And if you're unlucky enough to follow them, you may not come back the same. Skull, so, what do you think? Would you follow a path that wasn't there yesterday? Or would you turn back? If this story left you looking twice at the woods near your home, don't forget to subscribe, because more chilling tales like this are waiting. The forest has always been a place of mystery, a place where trails guide us, where paths promise direction, where we trust the ground beneath our boots to take us somewhere familiar. But these stories remind us of something far more unsettling. Sometimes the forest offers a path for reasons we can't understand. Daniel found a trail that whispered his name, as if the woods themselves knew who he was. Maya discovered a shortcut that bent reality, rearranging itself until the only way forward was toward something inhuman. And Ethan, he followed a path that didn't lead through the forest at all, but into something far older, far hungrier, and far less forgiving. Each story carries the same truth. These weren't trails built for people. They weren't shortcuts or detours or forgotten campsites. They were invitations or traps, left by something that lives in the spaces we don't map, in the corners of the forest we aren't meant to wander. And that's the true horror. Not the risk of getting lost, not the danger of wild animals, not even the fear of the dark. The real terror is the idea that the forest can find you, that it can carve a path just for you at the exact moment you're vulnerable enough or curious enough to take that first step. So the next time you're hiking, camping, or even just walking home near the woods, pay attention. If you see a trail that wasn't there yesterday, ask yourself, was it really meant to be there? Or was it meant for you? Because once you step onto a path the forest creates, you may never come back the same. Skull, if these stories made you shiver, don't wander off just yet. Hit that like button, share your own creepy forest story in the comments, and subscribe, because the forest isn't finished with us yet, and neither are the stories waiting in the dark.